and welcome to our complimentary webinar, which is brought to you today in partnership with NICE, Auscontact's national gold sponsor, and it's entitled How to Deliver Exceptional Digital Customer Experience. In the spirit of reconciliation, Auscontact acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Today's webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes, and during that time, with the help of today's special guest, Ian, we hope to spark your interest and engage you in the conversation, as well as provide some ideas to take back to your respective businesses. To round off the session, we'll be having a Q&A. I'm Fiona Keogh, CEO of Auscontact and your moderator for today. While we're waiting for everyone to join us, let's use the time to quickly run through some housekeeping. Remember to interact with us to maximise the benefit and to win something special. And there's no need to take too many notes now because we'll be providing you with the recording of the webinar. To interact with us, please use the Q&A button on the control panel. You can ask questions or make comments for Ian or myself throughout the webinar. Don't forget we're having a full Q&A. Please type your questions as you go along because then you won't forget to ask them. If you're having technical issues and you experience any issues with your internet connection as well, please note that on the control panel you can click the raise hand button and the Auscontact team will rush to your aid. Or you can revert to the registration confirmation email and all the relevant phone numbers and access codes are available there for you. I know that you've all asked questions before, but let's just give that Q&A button on the control panel a go now, just in case you haven't asked a question or answered a question. And the question today is fairly current, I think. Which northern New South Wales country town has been flooded twice in the last 4 weeks? Starts with an L. Sean, I don't think so. Ainsley's Nana lives there. Isn't that cool? Everyone seems to know the answer. It is actually Lismore, and our hearts go out to all the people in that local area and the surrounds. We have some prizes, as I said, to give away today. And the prizes are as follows. For the first question asked, can win a Poly Studio P5 or webcam. And for the most questions asked, the PolySync 20 smart speakerphone. But you must stay on till the end of the webinar and we know whether you're there or not. So with that, it gives me great pleasure to welcome a brand new voice to the microphone. It's Ian Lowe, Solutions Consultant at NICE. Welcome, Ian.
Thank you very much, Fiona, for that great introduction. It's great to have you all for this session. I'm really pleased to meet with you. Without further ado, I might kick off. So I thought it's important to set the scene and talk a little bit about the modern day. And what we're seeing out there is that consumer behavior and expectations are changing. And it's not just myself that's saying that, of course. The research is saying that 88% of organizations say that customers today have higher expectations than ever previously. And 79% of those customers are smarter and more informed than ever in the past. And 85% of organizations also say that customers are much more likely to share their experiences than in the past via social media, etc. And there's good reason for these changes. I mean, we are all interconnected these days with these great mobile devices. We interact with family, friends, colleagues via messaging all the time. So there's this real-time responsiveness and engagement that we live with day to day socially that we're now starting to expect from organizations when we deal with them. In addition, dare I say it, the big COVID word, the last 2 years has seen customers spend more time digitally than ever before. I mean, when we're under lockdown, you've got no choice but to be operating in a purely digital world. And so that introduces some interesting challenges and some interesting questions around how organizations are dealing with this changing of behavior with their customers. So this would be a good time for me to throw back out to you guys and have a bit of a poll and see if the research is corroborating what your own experiences and what your own actions are telling us.
Yeah. So Jess, could you kick the poll off? And I might share an experience just before the webinar. So I had to get one of the big 5 banks to do something for me today. So I started in their secure internet. Then I scrambled around and couldn't find the answer. So then I went to the chat. Then the chat said, no, you can do it on the website. So I went to the website. No, I couldn't do it on the website. So then I found out that I could do some of what I needed to do if I picked up the phone. But if I really needed to do what I needed to do, I needed to go into a branch. Wow. So I was exhausted by just working out what I needed to do, let alone actually getting it done. So there you go. No, Ainsley, it wasn't CBA. It's okay. Okay. So, Ian, what do you expect to see?
I'm actually really curious. I know what I would do. I absolutely, I actually had an argument with a poor contact center agent because they were trying to get me to go to a store in the height of COVID, and I was just refusing to. So I would Google, but I'm curious to see what people say. Okay. That is pretty much corroborating what the research tells us. That's excellent. So it's good to know my own personal preferences aren't completely out of whack. And it's good to know that the research out there is also not completely out of whack. So it's really interesting that those 2 options, literally 82%, like 41 and 41, 41% Google, 41% website, indicating that customers attempt to take care of matters themselves. So your 82% in terms of poll results versus the 81% here is, as spot on as can be. And I wish I could, plan that even better next time. So customers are actually willing to self-serve, like our own behavior, our own poll response says that. But it's really interesting because we also know that 68% of online experiences begin with a search engine, with Google predominantly. And if we do a Google search, we're 90% likely to only click on the first page of the search results. In fact, if we don't find what we're looking for in our first page, we're much, much more likely to retype in our search inquiry slightly differently than to go to a second page. So what does that mean? If we know that we need to help our customers on every step of their journey, we want to meet them when they're coming in on that digital journey. We want to walk hand in hand. We want to help them. But they're starting off at Google. So how can we reach out that far to them? Because if we were to try and do that, we have to start thinking of our digital footprint, our digital front door completely differently, because it's extending all the way out to Google search. So how do we extend our reach? And the answer, and I'm not one to kind of keep people in suspense, so the answer surprisingly is knowledge management. And I'll talk a bit about how we are helping organizations through knowledge management basically get into that search engine territory and allowing their customers to help themselves. So I apologize for the very, very busy slide. I promise you it's not that bad, and I'll explain it. So essentially, Gartner did some research, and that research was really looking at technologies, looking at tasks, looking at processes that had an impact on operational productivity, but measuring that against its impact on customer experience. So on the bottom left, it's got something like recording. And so recording doesn't yield a lot of productivity or efficiency, doesn't yield a lot towards customer experience, but typically for compliance risk purposes, we have it in our contact center. Then you go up this stack, and there's lots of different things there. I'll just highlight maybe workforce engagement, workforce management. And that's something that we use to really drive productivity and performance of our agents, but it's much more internal facing in our organization and doesn't necessarily correlate or have direct impact on customer experience. Now, the thing about knowledge is, knowledge management is all the way in that top right category, which means that it has high operational productivity impact as well as high customer experience. And again, the research sort of corroborates that. So 28% of customers say that the most frustrating issue that they find is when the information is simple, but it's very hard to find. And I know I've definitely encountered that, where you know your question should be simple, but you're taking forever to find that answer. And customers prefer knowledge bases to all other types of self-service. That's why you start at Google. It's a search. And that's why you use the organization's website and that search capability. And the interesting stat for me is that 66% of customer service teams or organizations use knowledge bases, but 82% of customers use knowledge bases. So organizations are actually lagging behind what customers do and use, which is an area of opportunity. So to understand a little bit more about this, let me talk about how knowledge is traditionally sort of created and managed, okay? So normally you have your knowledge article, your content, and you create that in some sort of format, and then you publish it to a website or intranet portal of some sort so that your agents can access it. Sometimes you create public-facing documents and content, and again, publish that externally facing so that your customers can have access to it. However, were you to approach it in such a way, typically it means that those knowledge articles are standalone, they're separate, they're unstructured, and when they're unstructured, it means that Google bots, Google spiders, cannot crawl or search through them, okay? They're not linked typically to one another, they're just sort of islands, and so that content is not connected. However, what we would propose doing differently and what we can help you with our CXone expert solution is to have a web cloud-based knowledge management system that is inherently structured and set up to be search engine optimized. It has structured content to allow for Google indexing. Because it's cloud-based, it's automatically optimized, and we are optimizing it for speed. And that's important because, believe it or not, speed is one of the factors under which the Google search engine algorithm operates, because Google does not want your search to be slowed down in any way. Otherwise, it's not providing the experience that their customers demand. And it enforces that and other search engine optimization practices, including managing links and link backs. So these are natively what our knowledge management solution enhances with regards to the search engine and the Google search engine algorithm. So speed, quality, crawlability. I won't go through these because unless you happen to be a bit of an expert in SEO, it's a dark art. But there is something worth pointing out, which is typically in the search engine world, you're trying to come up in that first page of results, as I mentioned earlier. You're trying to come up as high as possible in that search engine ranking listing. So number one has a certain high percentage of click-throughs, and then number two has less, and it drops all the way down. So number one will be orders of magnitude much higher than number three, for instance. But what's interesting is there's now like number zero, which is known as a snippet. So a snippet is seen as kind of your absolute response that lots of people have clicked on and have deemed to be definitive as an answer to your question. So the example on screen is what a snippet is. And that has a 35.1% click-through rate, depending on which sort of search engine research you believe. So why I mention snippets in particular is because we've helped different customers with search engine optimization, including snippets. And the example that I wanted to talk to you about today is Cisco. So Cisco have their Meraki line of business, lots of customers, and due to their customer base, they're aimed not so much at the huge enterprise end of town with that product line. They have a lot of customers engaging them. And the example that we have is that Cisco did an exercise where they benchmarked and baseline what things looked like before implementing CXone Expert and what it looked like after. And just one page alone, which I actually have the link for because I was curious, we were able to allow 50,000 click-throughs to just that one page in 1 month. So that in itself is a tremendous result. And it's results like that combined with others that help Cisco Meraki increase their keyword organic search click-throughs by 3 times and was able to multiply their snippets by 4 times in terms of what came through those search engine results. And that resulted in a case deflection rate of 11 to 13% increase every month. So that's Cisco Meraki. And then we've also helped another, a global appliance manufacturer. I can't necessarily state who they are. We've actually got a couple of global appliance manufacturers on our customer list, including one in region. But similarly, we're able to help this organization with their page sessions, page views, search traffic. And basically, we're able to reduce their assisted service, their on-site service calls to the extent where this organization was able to save $20 million. So that's some pretty big bickies in just helping customers, helping themselves. So great. We've now search engine optimized our knowledge content and our articles are appearing in Google. It's helping customers help themselves, as I said earlier. But what's next? Well, the trouble with, or not trouble, but knowledge is not something that you can set up once and leave be. You've got to continuously be adding to it. You also want to be asking yourself the question, how else can I help my customers through their digital journey? So you've got to be looking for other areas of opportunity. And both of those questions, what content should I add? How can I help my customers? The answer centers around understanding what your customers need. Why are they visiting you? Why are they engaging with you? So I'm going to break, and I promise you this is not a loaded question, and have another poll around who has tried to implement an AI chatbot / virtual agent in the past. Fiona, did you want, or Jess, did you want to kind of drive that for me?
Yep, Jess is going to launch the widget right now, Ian, and the question is everybody's hands on the keyboard. Who has tried to implement an AI chatbot or a virtual agent? You only get to pick one. Yes, we have tried or are trying. We tried, but gave it up. We're thinking about it. It's not for us just right now. Now, Ian, what do you think you're likely to see? Now, you're not allowed to look at the answers on this one.
I'm not looking at the answers. First of all, this is a bit of a trick question because I promise you guys I'm not taking this the direction you might think I'm going to take this question. So I think that some will absolutely have tried. I think perhaps some have tried, but it wasn't as successful as they liked. Generally, I would say a lot of people are thinking about it. So curious now to see what the answers might be.
Yeah, well, half of our audience are thinking long and hard about it. So it's probably good that they're here with us, Ian, I would think. Yes, we've tried. Nah, trying. Not for us, 18%, and tried but gave up. So they're the people to connect with and find out, why did you give up?
Awesome. So this is, again, it's in line with what I had thought. You're always worried when you do these polls because sometimes those answers will surprise you, but this is good. And by good, I mean not so good. And by that, I mean these chatbot projects and implementations do not always go as well as we would like. So Microsoft did some research. 35% reported that chatbots could not resolve their issues. 36%, and this is customers as opposed to organizations, 36% found that when they had chatbot experiences, it was completely ineffective. Now, those aren't the type of results that you're typically looking for when you're embarking on big sort of projects. And there's a very good reason for that. So it turns out that customers will ask you questions in many, many different ways. And it also turns out that it's really hard to train a robot to understand human speech. So training virtual assistants, chatbots, requires natural language skills. And it sounds easy, but it can be quite complex, because how I will frame a question, how I will ask a question, how I think of something is very different to the next person, and might be very different to what that organization expects. So there's things like jargon, there's colloquial expressions that need to be taken into account, and then there's specific products, names, terms, all of which you need to train these robots to understand. The personal example I have, and I did not know that Fiona had a banking example, because I too have a banking example where every now and then I need to arrange for what I call a direct debit, which is I need to go pay somebody a certain amount periodically. And the thing is, I need to do that pretty infrequently, and I never remember how to do it. So if I Google it, I naturally type in direct debit, and it turns out that's actually not what it's called. That's not what that process is. That's not what it is. But in my head, that's what I call it. That's how I think of it. And so Googling it, going to the organization's website, does not yield the results. It yields completely different results, which aren't what I'm looking for. So I end up navigating and try to find the answer myself. And eventually I might stumble on the right way of doing it and remember. Or as I've had to call into the contact center. Okay, so that's an example of kind of either jargon or just specific terms that are used that a customer may not always understand. And I apologize to all the banking people out there who are going, that's not what it's called, and you're an idiot. So if that's such a challenge, how do I go about finding out what my customers want? Because I can't implement a chatbot if I don't understand what they're asking for, because there's no way I'm going to deliver them what answer they're looking for. So typically, if you're an organization, you want to try and be pretty comprehensive in terms of understanding customer intent. So ideally, you want to review every interaction, but that can be quite hard to do, because how do you go about that? Do you look at your website and the search results? Do you look at your, the knowledge base that you've made accessible to your customers and they've typed in their question? That's great. You have some idea of intent there, although you do have the hard exercise of trying to group all these different ways that questions are being asked together. But certainly you don't have a complete view, because you don't know necessarily if that was successful or not for the customer. You don't know if they've escalated and called in or chatted to an agent. So you've got an incomplete view there. So if you look at the other side of that equation, you look at, say, from the contact center's perspective, how might they review that? Well, disposition codes come to mind. But those of us who've been in the industry know that disposition codes are kind of flawed. There's research that says that agents tend to pick the top disposition codes. People have changed the order of their disposition codes, and the one at the top still is the highest percentage by far, so go figure. But even if you got your agents to do the right thing, and and your agents are generally well-intentioned, a customer can call, and often do call, for many different things. So a conversation might entail 3 or 4 different outcomes. How's an agent meant to log or disposition that, right? And so typically the systems and processes a contact center does not cater for that. So again, it's flawed. So how do we review every interaction? How do we categorize intents? You've got to group and you've got to group these intents together. It's not easy. And they'll come in lots of different words and phrases. Great, you've got that now, imagine. But that doesn't tell you what the root cause was. It tells you why they're engaging with you, but what triggered that? What caused that? Because something might have. And if you can find what that is, then you can perhaps ensure that goes away. So similarly, how do you track each answer that you provide to your customers? And how do you follow these complex conversations? Because many times, several of these things are happening per convo. So how organizations try to crack this nut is they'll form a committee or a workshop, and they'll try and address this, but they typically start it with that incomplete data I was telling you about earlier. Oftentimes, they will try and gather evidence, but some of that evidence will be anecdotal. So my team leaders swear that this call comes in all the time. They're always asking about this. I get heaps of these, right? And so you'll have hypotheses about with varying degrees of informed data. That exercise can be time consuming and certainly resource intensive because you're gathering the brains together to try and make these decisions. And in terms of decisions, sometimes that is subjective, particularly around prioritization. Some teams will say, this is most important to us. Others will say, no, 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 we should be doing this. Because oftentimes when you're embarking on these projects, you're saying, let's get the low hanging fruit. Let's do the easy stuff that comes to mind. But even getting that far, it's still subjective. It's still hard to prioritize. So it doesn't cater for those complex transactions that you know you're having. And great, we now know we want to solve these questions that our customers are asking, but we're no further along in terms of how, and we're no further along in terms of what answers should we provide to our customers for these exact questions. And we now need to do an exercise as to what's easy to automate. And so that's where we can come in with our analytics solution. So what traditionally was in the world of speech analytics is now just analytics because there's speech and chat and email, text analytics. So we have something called Enlighten AI, which is our analytics solution. Now, some of you will be stopping at this moment saying, hang on a second, Ian. Analytics solutions have exactly the same problem that chatbots and AI have because it's hard to train a robot to understand human speech. And I'd say to that, you're absolutely spot on correct. But the difference with our Enlighten AI is that we worked with organizations, we partnered with them, and we have billions and billions of interaction data, okay? And when I say interaction data and billions of data, I mean we have call recordings, we have transcriptions that have been human validated, that have been labeled and has context provided around it. And so when you have that labeled data, when you understand and have validated and verified that information, and then it allows you to create models around all those words, all those phrases that are pieced together and combined. And so you're able to create models to understand things like intent. You're able to understand things like what a complaint looks like. You're able to understand things like sentiment. I know when a customer is unhappy because they've used these words, and I've got these billions of interactions that prove when customers use these phrases, these words, that means they're unhappy because I've labeled that bit of data, unhappy customer. I know what a complaint looks like because they've used this language. I know what a good sale looks like. I know what a bad sale looks like because, again, I've got labeled data tells me this was a successful outcome, this was an unsuccessful outcome. I even know when I have a vulnerable customer. And we know these days, we just talked about massive floods and so forth, that vulnerable customers definitely have to be handled very differently to your normal customer. So Enlighten comes with all of this interaction data and all of this labeled information to basically allow you to hit the ground running on these projects, which has previously been the biggest stumbling block. So what does Enlighten do in a little bit more detail? It allows us to improve automation resolution because we're going to work and feed in this information, provide this model, provide this training data to your AI chatbots, help tune, optimize, and teach it to understand your customer's intent. Similarly, we'll feed into knowledge management systems so that we can service our customers using their language and actioning their queries. And when you do all of that, it gets you to that point where now you can start understanding your customers and what they want. And then you can look for root cause and you look for opportunities to proactively reach out to them, which is kind of normally untapped territory because you're normally fighting too many fires in your contact center. So a little bit more detail. Enlighten analyzes all your interactions and discovers best opportunities for self-service. Okay, so it'll help you classify intent, like I said before. It'll understand resolution likelihood, because here's the thing. We're not just looking at one side of this conversation in terms of the questions that your customers are asking of you. Because we've got all these call center recordings, we're hearing, we're transcribing, we're understanding, we're scoring all the answers your agents are providing to those customers. So we know when something is successful. We know what was said, what was done. And so we understand commitments that your customers make to you, but also we understand commitments that your agents make to them. We understand things like transfers, sentiment I mentioned earlier, contact duration, and the toing and froing that occurs with calls. We understand that as well. And all of that feeds in to allow us to provide an optimization score. And if you enter in certain data points, ROI for basically every interaction type, interaction task that occurs in the contact center. And that allows you to decide what to automate, what to not automate, because you've got to turn this around and make it a data-driven approach. And normally that's quite hard to achieve. But Enlighten, like I said earlier, allows you to hit the ground running. And then lastly, it allows you to do things like understand specific words and phrases for your conversational flows. So what does that look like? And this is quite important because as a minimum, Enlighten helps you visualize and map out your intent. Okay, so if you were to say, great, I need to understand why my customers are engaging me. Well, we know that they say something in 10 different ways. So how am I meant to grab all of these 10 things, group them together, and then make decisions on that? Well, visually. So Enlighten will map out all the different intents in the organization. And on the bottom left there, we have this big picture. I know it's a little bit hard to understand, which is why I've blown up that sort of red section up here. But this is an example of a telco. And I use this because we're generally all familiar with telcos because we've got these devices. And these are all the reasons why you will call a telco. So there'll be billing, there'll be internet connectivity, there'll be phone issues. So if I expand that internet connectivity part out, you've got internet, infrastructure, speed, security. The size of that bubble really denotes the volume of calls, interactions around that specific intent. The color of the bubble denotes the automation score. Okay, so green has the highest automation score. The more green it is, the better. So this allows you to understand where volume of traffic is going in your contact center and allows you to kind of dig deeper around what processes can be automated. But slicing that view up slightly, we can look at it sort of in a tabular view and understand percentages. Great, internet connectivity equates to 8.6% of these type of intents, but those are not necessarily easily automatable. But we've got 5.6% over here of another internet connectivity related intent that perhaps could be more automatable, right? I know automatable is probably not a word, apologize. I can't stop myself using it, especially in this context, so forgive me. And so we can look through this in a very data-driven way and look for areas of opportunity. And throughout this entire process, you understand the specific phrases customers use. So you can drill down into each of these. And that's important because remember those complex conversations I mentioned earlier where a customer calls, they've got lots of different things that they're looking to do. The conversation's going sort of in lots of different places. It's previously been quite hard to understand those. And so they kind of get grouped up into one bucket and they're not. You can't treat them as that because when you automate, you might be able to automate a part of that conversation, but without a view of it all, you can't really have a chance of looking to self-serve as much of that as possible. Well, Enlighten helps you do that. So it recognizes those separately. It looks at these complex calls and understands the relationship between all of these different bits of conversation that occur and maps them out for you. So you might then understand that you're only going to be able to automate a component of that call, but that's still much better than none of it at all. And it's still much better than looking at it as one big holistic thing. It certainly allows you to prioritize when you can get that degree of granular detail. So some Enlighten case studies, we worked with a media company and we were able to help their automation, their self-service, so that 30% more self-service occurred. And the way that occurred was essentially that organization was able to analyze the calls coming in. We're able to see that a large number of those calls related to customers looking to reschedule appointments. And then they were able to enhance their self-service. They're actually able to build that capability into their chatbot. And so allow customers to do that function using the language, the words, the terms, the phrases that those customers would use and request in that chatbot, and allow those customers to reschedule those appointments. And so that reduced 30% of their, or increased their 30% of their self-service. We're also able to save them $2 million as a result of fewer calls going into the contact center. And again, they were able to analyze, determine that a lot of calls were coming in for what the customer perceived to be a service outage, but actually was the result of a bill not being paid. And so recognizing that, seeing that data, seeing that analysis, they were able to proactively SMS out billing reminders to those customers. That has that net effect of actually increasing customer satisfaction because they don't have an outage, certainly decreasing live calls, and which all combine to $2 million saving. We also help the telco decrease escalations. That telco, again, applied Enlighten, analyzed the calls coming in, and saw that a lot of those calls were relating to promotions that they were running. And a lot of calls related to customers wanting to take advantage of those promotions, but not necessarily knowing when those promotions would end. And so this organization basically built capability and enhanced their website so that customers could easily find that information and avoid having to call into the contact center. And that resulted in a 25% decrease in calls, essentially. Okay, great. Summarizing. We've helped customers help themselves by getting all the way into their search results, providing them with the content that they need to be able to resolve their issue. We now have a much better understanding of customer intent. We have a much better understanding of the ways with which a customer engages us, the ways with the terms that they use, the words that they use, the questions that they ask. And we use that information to then enhance our self-service, optimize our chatbots, optimize our knowledge base so that customers can more easily find the answers that they're looking for. And so what we should do then, if we're able to get that far ahead, is we should also look to target friction points that occur in other parts of their digital journey. So a large part of my presentation so far has kind of centered around service, although I would say that a lot of the concepts absolutely apply to the sales world. But I'm going to switch it around a little bit and use different examples this time around, just so we look after our sales brethren, and talk a little bit about online sales and how you can help customers through that journey. Now, the last couple of years has seen an absolutely phenomenal increase in customer digital journeys, but also just customer sales online. I mean, when you're under lockdown, you've got no choice but to be on the internet buying things. But historically, we've seen some really poor conversion rates when it comes to online shopping. So it's only 3% on desktop, it's 2% on a tablet, it's 1% on mobile. So most customers abandon their experience for one reason or another. So whilst it may not be possible to sort of convert that all the way, it's certainly a massive area of opportunity that organizations everywhere are looking at. So Google believes that when they aren't successful, it drives calls into the contact center, and that's 265 billion customer service calls, which is about $1.3 trillion. But because they're Google, they also can see that 60 to 80% of those calls, the customer's on your website. So we know this. I've worked with lots of different customers. We've definitely seen this as of years and years ago. I've definitely got statistics around the 80% mark with Australian and New Zealand customers. And so how can we help that? Like, how can we enhance our customers' journey when you're on our website? And I just want to point out to something that we take advantage of every single day. So we get these proactive pop-ups every day. If you've got a flight and Virgin, Qantas want to get a hold of you, they'll notify you proactively with these pop-ups. if you're unfortunate where your flight's been rescheduled, we've had to cancel your flight. So that's that Qantas message. Perhaps a better one is an online shopping one where Australia Post will tell you when they're about to drop a parcel off at your house, which is great to make sure that you're home to receive these packages. Google will make sure that it pops up something to the front face of your phone when you're approaching your turn. So all of these pop-ups are welcomed. They're enjoyed. They're taken advantage of. And the reason is that they're contextual and they're relevant to you. So they're very personal. They're not spam. It's not marketing. It's very contextual and relevant. It's proactively delivered to you at the right time with the right information. And you don't have to do a thing. It's zero effort on your part. You just get these and enjoy them. So how does that apply to your customer's digital journey on the web? So we're going to use a retail example, but there's plenty of other examples which I'll touch on later on in my presentation. So in this fictitious example, we've got a retail website, Go Retail. And in this case, I, as the customer, am looking at a new camera. And so when a customer is navigating this website with a set of rules that you can predefine, you can engage them proactively with this little pop-up. And in this case, we're just saying, hi, you'll find the same great experience and service online as you would expect on a phone or in a store. And if you need help, just tap on this little bell, which is this green icon on the far right, bottom right. And were a customer to click on that, they will get a bigger pop-up on their page that will give them the different options with which to engage. So you could perhaps transition them chat to email, voice, whatever you like, or provide them with more information that is relevant and contextual to them. So this is just an indication of, hey, we're here for you, we can help you. And you can engage us in this specific way. And so in this example, we're now going to wait because we don't want to keep bombarding them. We don't want to keep engaging them. We want to do it at a point which is contextual, specific, and relevant to them. Okay. I know as a shopper that I hate when it keeps asking me a million times because I said no once. I shouldn't have to say it more than once, right? So now it's many minutes later. I've been shopping for a while. I've exhibited all these types of buying behavior. I'm now at a Canon Rebel XS digital camera, and the organization knows I'm close to buying. And one of the reasons why it knows is because I've clicked on the review link and I'm reading reviews right now. So it could pop up using this example. Hi, want to learn more? Curious about whether this is the right camera for you? Take a look at this video. And if the customer opts in and clicks on that link, another little pop-up appears with a review video embedded in it. So again, the key here is it's actually helpful, it's welcome, it's contextual, it's relevant, it's specific. We know customers engage with us lots of different devices and channels. This is irrespective of whether they're on the web, on a desktop, or on their mobile phone using their browser on the phone, or in-app. So this is an example of what in-app looks like. So great, we've kind of got a couple of use cases there, and there's many use cases to come. But let's look at another one. They're now at the checkout part of their shopping experience, and they've typed in the coupon code. I do this all the time because I like to get bargains. And inevitably, you get the coupon does not exist, coupon has expired, error message. So normally that's the end of it. You're disappointed. You now have to make a choice. You're hoping to use that. You thought you'd get a discount. What now? Again, the customers exhibit all this buying behavior. They're a hot lead. How should we treat them? In this case, this example is perhaps a lower value or less important customer or less worth item. So we might pop up something that says, hi, sorry about this, but we don't have any specials on at the moment. But if you fill out this form and give us your email address, we can put you on the list to make sure you receive discount codes in the future. So now you've captured information about this hot lead. Perhaps you can market them, perhaps you can offer them something to entice them to buy. So that is far better than just letting them go. But if they are perhaps a higher value customer or the product is of higher worth to you, then you can have a completely different experience. You could say, coupon does not exist, but sorry about that. But good news, you do qualify for another working coupon code. Click here, here's 25% off, buy now. So what's special about all of this is not the fact that these pop-ups are occurring that are very contextual and relevant to the customer. That's certainly important, but there's rules determining that. And that's what makes it contextual and relevant. And so you've got to understand those rules. You've got to understand the behavior. You've got to embed those in the right place. And normally, if you look to do that, that's an exercise because it's web development, it's web pages, it's JavaScript, it's the realm of IT and web development. And that takes months, possibly longer to try and build. And these days, we know we need to be dynamic and reactive and responsive to our changing customers. So the way that our solution works is it's rules-based and has a business UI and has a business interface to enable and empower the business to make these changes. So I've used some retail examples, but here's some use cases by vertical. We've got just the 3 on screen, but there's plenty more. Retail, banking, insurance. In the retail world, you've got questions around the item. You've got where is my order, WSMO, which apparently is a common term in the retail world. I had to look it up. Shipping questions, that's an obvious one. Checkout and payment assistance. In the banking world, new account opening. Again, we'd like to encourage our customers to do that online, but how easy, how hard is it? Payment transfers, that direct debit example that I've used in the past, sure could have done with that. Recent transactions, login issues, right? We don't want our customers to lock themselves out. We want to help them. We want to guide them. We want to offer them an opportunity to have their password reset via email, by another method of authentication. Insurance quoting, filling out those quote forms and application forms is always a challenge. There's always abandonment there. Making a payment, filing a claim, and helping our customers with claim statuses. So we've got a couple of case studies and use cases that I just want to quickly talk to you about, checking time. One is an insurance company in the US that basically provides renters insurance for customers. And one of the things that it was looking to do was kind of upgrade extra insurance that insurance companies love to do. And this was specifically around liability. And so there was a question on that form that says, do you want liability coverage? And customers not knowing what liability coverage was or is, just like myself, they would typically go, no thanks, I don't know what that is, I'm good. But we're able to offer these pop-ups. We're able to help educate customers. It's like being there and having a conversation with them at the specific moment, having a very specific, relevant convo with them, and to help them make the best decision that they needed to make. So these pop-ups help this particular insurance organization get 30% more quotes initiated, 70% more completed, and basically a net result of 50% more products sold. So that's pretty spectacular. Using a different example, so this is MoneyGram. Basically, they assist you in sending money overseas. And one of the challenges is when you're sending money overseas, you've got all this legislation, you've got all these rules governing on the destination country. And so sometimes they need to guide and inform customers and take them through that process because it's not as simple. So in this case, we have someone wanting to send 50,000 rupees to India, but there's a legislation there that says they can't take 50,000 out in cash. You've got to nominate a bank account or direct debit account to transfer that amount of money to. And so, Mr. Customer, that's the reason why. And I need now to capture this extra bit of information from you. And by arming that customer with that information, they can make the right decision for themselves. Maybe they lower that amount, whatever that rationale is. What MoneyGram saw was a 2 times conversion rate increase. So these were completing at twice the amount that they were before, 10% reduction in unnecessary calls. And because they were also using these pop-ups, the CXone guide to encourage membership, they saw a 50% increase in loyalty program membership. So to summarize, we've helped optimize search, provided knowledge articles right to our customers' doorstep, right where they needed them. We've understood intent and the language that they use to ask questions of us. And now we've helped guide them through these friction points in their journey. So I hope that sort of makes it a little bit clearer how we can help, how NICE can help customers, our customer organizations help their customers through their digital journey. Now, I started off this session with some stats, and I always like to end with just one more. So we knew from the beginning, 81% of customers attempt to take care of matters themselves. So that's their self-service rate. But only 9% of customers reported solving their issues completely. So that to me represents a huge area of opportunity for all of us. And I'm looking forward to sort of increasing that stat. Thank you all.
Thanks, Ian. And isn't that telling a huge story at the end? 81% of us actually want to do it ourselves, but only 9% of us are actually successful. So we actually have, as organisations and as enterprises, quite a bit of work to do to get those numbers more closely aligned. Don't forget, there's prizes to win. First question asked, win the Poly Studio P5 webcam. Most questions asked, the Poly Sync 20 smart speakerphone. We do have a question from Kelly that quite a few people are interested in. Kelly said, I find that customers want meaningful and relevant answers. Do you have any idea if it is more beneficial to have an agent at the end of the chat?
I think the answer is it depends. The answer is always it depends. So some interactions you don't want to engage customers in because ideally, if they can help themselves, great. Other times, like the sales world, you sometimes when it's a high value item, when it's a high value service or product, you absolutely want a conversation to occur because you know that closing with a human, with an agent, is absolutely much more successful than otherwise, right? So if you're doing online insurance, for instance, because I've lived in that space for a little bit, you want to drive that phone call if you can. But other times when you might not, you might be quite happy for them to live in a world of just chatbot agent, virtual agents. So it really depends. And you've also got to be thinking about it from the customer's perspective. What do they want, right? Sometimes you've got that pushy interface that say, hey, you want to chat to us? Do you want to chat to us? And I'm like, no, I don't, right? Other times you've got the opposite where you're like, how can I possibly find your phone number or your chat option because you've buried it in your website? I can't find this thing. So think about it from your customer's perspective as well. I would encourage you. So I know that's not quite a very direct answer, but that's the real answer.
Thanks, Ian. Appreciate that. So we've got a very cheeky question that's come in. And I'm going to read it verbatim for you so you know why it's so cheeky. It says, if it's so good, why have we not heard about these NICE knowledge management or guide solutions before?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the true answer is we acquired a couple of different organizations. So they've absolutely existed in the past. They've absolutely got a customer base, but we've not promoted as NICE because we have only relatively recently acquired them. And so one of those is MindTouch for the knowledge management side of things. And the other one is Moxie from the CXone guide side of things. So great question. We haven't tried to sort of keep it a deep, dark secret, but we've only relatively recently acquired them.
Yeah, and look, there are a couple of well-known brands, and congratulations on the acquisition as well with that, Ian. We live in a really, really fast-paced world where everybody wants to have the answer yesterday rather than tomorrow or even today, so they know what's going on. And so the question is, Ian, can NICE's Enlighten Analytics solution operate in real time?
Yeah, and again, that's a really good question. So absolutely. I spoke a lot about it's like doing the analysis historically to understand why your customers are engaging. But another really good use case is, let's say, sales coaching, right? Like we have team leaders in contact centers. They're meant to be doing literally a million things, including sales coaching if they need to. But it's really hard for them to do that. But when you're listening in on conversations, when you're understanding what is happening in that conversation in real time, for all conversations, for all your agents in real time, we can present information to that agent to help them in their conversations with customers. So that's sales coaching, but it's not just relating to sales, because it might be the right information that they need to provide to their customers, and all of that in real time. And to do that real time, like I said, you have to understand human speech, which is absolutely a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely it is. So that's the almost at time. Ian, I'd love to hear some closing thoughts from your good self, please.
Closing thoughts, because I've spoken so much. Look, I think the main thing is the world has changed. We need to be thinking about our customers through their digital journey. They're engaging with us in lots of different ways. They want to help themselves. We need to help them help themselves. We saw that research, we saw that stat. And we at NICE believe we can help you with that process through a whole range of different ways. So we're keen to do that. But if nothing else, we're keen to have the conversation and promote customer experience, because I think we can all win in this regard. Customers can win, organizations can win. So that's probably my closing message.
Thanks, Ian. And I must admit, when you put up the slide about the media company, about XO's success, my mind actually went to Hennessy or Remy Martin. Probably not on topic, but I wanted to say a huge thank you to you for your sharing all those use cases and the whole story, and really deep diving into what the process needs to be and what you need to take on board, and rather than, you know, just do a helicopter sort of view about what actions and process needs to be undertaken. To our National Gold sponsor, NICE, thank you once again for bringing such a great topic to life. And to everybody that stayed with us today, thank you for taking an hour out of your very busy diaries, and we'll see you next time. Stay well.
Cheers all. Thank you.